Hey everybody, Mike Miller with the Herald-Times, joined by IU basketball columnist Jeremy Price. Almost said Andy Graham. I've been doing football for 2 darn months in a row here now, so Jeremy Price is with me. We're back to basketball back here, as you can see, at Assembly Hall, Simon Scott Assembly Hall, brand new Jumbotron above us. A few other renovations, obviously, have been put into place here, and Juwan Morgan is your starting point guard. Let's just throw that out there right now, because in addition to all the other renovations, IU's backcourt is also getting a little bit of a renovation, and Juwan Morgan is the guy who will play point guard. No, I'm just kidding. But he did start. Yeah, point forward. He did play a little bit at the point this evening. Actually started there, so we could just start with the starting lineup. It was Juwan Morgan. It was James Blackman Jr., Zach McRoberts, OG Anunoby, and Thomas Bryant. Probably never see it again. But it was a nice little wrinkle to come out with this evening. Obviously, I think Juwan Morgan has been noted quite often, just his versatility, what he brings Indiana, and we certainly saw it at times last year, especially late when he did play some point forward down the stretch. But his versatility was on display tonight. We saw some more offensive potential from OG Anunoby, 16 points and flashing. A deep shot with some consistency. Devontae Green, too, a guy who can add a little bit of versatility in the backcourt, a guy who has a real nose for getting to the rim. Game-high 17 points for Devontae Green tonight. So those were just a few of the initial takeaways. Jeremy, what did you come away with from this game?
Yeah, I think the lineups thing is interesting, but it's sort of one of those things that you obviously can't put too much stock in anything. I counted up 8 different lineups in the first 10 minutes of the game alone tonight. Mm-hmm. So not a lot of consistency there. A lot of mixing and matching and trying to figure out who works well with who. And I think the big thing is that it's just a matter of finding a comfort level. And for me, I thought one of the most interesting stats of the night was that Indiana outscored Hope 60-16 when Robert Johnson was on the floor.
Yeah.
You can read too much or too little sometimes into this whole plus-minus thing, but to me that speaks a little bit to the comfort level that Indiana has when Robert Johnson's on the floor. They sort of a calming presence. They sort of know what he brings to the table. They're sort of looking to him to provide that leadership when he's on the floor. Now it's up to him to deliver on that, obviously, and I think there's some other guys capable of that. But I think when we looked at some of the issues that this team had tonight, defensive rebounding, turnovers in particular, I thought were largely a product of just sort of that uncomfortability with not having that familiar point guard like a Yogi Ferrell out there tonight.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Johnson's kind of serves as an anchor at this point when he's on the floor. I mean, whether it's the offensive end, obviously a guy who can shoot a little bit and just kind of he brings a steadying presence to the floor, but also defensively, I think it's quite apparent when he's out on the floor that IU just kind of seems maybe better placed, better positioned when he's out there. He kind of gives you a guy to start with up top. I forgot what I was going to say. Hey, it's the exhibition season for us too, right?
Absolutely.
What was I going to say? OG. Let's go to OG. 16 points. Came out here shooting 4 for 7 from three-point range. Actually saw him out on the floor about 5 o'clock this evening. First guy on the floor. Really just moving around the arc and putting up deep shots. That's something that Tom Crean wants to see more of. That's something they've emphasized, him being maybe a more potent offensive guy who can not only shoot it but also create a little more on his own, coming off the wings. This was really the first time we've seen him play. It was the first game he started, and we're going to see a lot more of that moving forward. I mean, you can say what you will about the starting lineup. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Juwan Morgan starting as the point forward. But OG certainly tabbed as a guy who will probably start at that 3 or 4 for Indiana, depending on whether they got 3 guards or even if they go a little bit bigger. But he's a guy who's going to play a lot. He's going to start. He's going to play a lot of minutes, a lot of meaningful minutes. And tonight, I think he made the most of them on both ends.
Yeah, he's obviously been shooting it well, and everything we've seen so far from Hoosier Hysteria to Haunted Hall to this exhibition. And we saw last year he got off to a really good start shooting the ball, faded a little bit at the end of the year, but I think it's very clear that he's capable of doing that. It's now a matter of if he's making that shot, that should open up the opportunity for him to drive even more, but now he's got to make good decisions when he drives. And maybe this wasn't the best example tonight, because a lot of times when he was driving tonight, Hope had such a small team that it's very difficult for Indiana's big guys to drive into the lane without those little guys trying to pick their pockets. So very challenging from that aspect. But then again, he had a couple of turnovers, a traveling call that sort of might have reminded you of Troy Williams a little bit with the cha-cha-cha before putting the ball on the deck. baseline drive to nowhere, and he wasn't the only one guilty of that tonight, as usual. But it's a learning curve. It's obviously a learning curve. It's more responsibility for OG, more diversity that he's looking to bring to his game. Obviously, a work in progress.
Someone was mentioning this, back in the press room earlier. But I mean, if you're kind of replacing Troy Williams in this lineup with OG, I mean, even with some of the, I don't want to say shortcomings, but some of the limitations to his game, I think almost still you would still take the defensive reliability and just some of the other things he brings that Troy was just kind of hit and miss with.
Yeah, and I think when you mention replacing some of the things that Troy Williams brought to the table, you mentioned Devontae Green earlier. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways he sort of brings that attack mentality that Troy had to the table as much as anybody else on this team. He's sort of got that same mentality where he can screw up 5 times in a row and it's not going to bother him to go at it a 6th time. He's just going to keep attacking and attacking and attacking till he gets it right. And for better or worse, that's sort of the way it's going to be. But I think he showed that he's got that mindset, and that's going to make him a valuable piece maybe more quickly than some of the other freshmen at the outset of this season.
Yeah, I could totally buy that. I think there's a real high ceiling defensively, too. It's often tough to really gauge a freshman with their freshman guard defensively, especially early in the year. But he's a guy who had that reputation coming out of high school. He was a guy who was very hard-nosed defensively. He's quick. He's just has a good feel. Obviously, has the the bloodlines and the pedigree in that regard. But there's a lot of intrigue with Devontae Green. I think that tonight's game really lends itself to that. Just what we saw as a guy who again could drive, he could shoot a little bit, and also defensively, there's a lot of will there to be in the right position. Who else we got? Who have we not mentioned?
Well, Deron Davis.
Deron Davis and Thomas Bryant played together.
Yeah, and Tom Crean mentioned in the post game that Deron Davis is sort of a hockey player at this point. Yeah. A lot of quick, short shifts for him. Obviously, he's still not where he needs to be conditioning-wise, health-wise. Has had various issues off and on all summer into the fall. And, sat out the Haunted Hall of Hoops just the other night, but apparently the ankle that he tweaked there was feeling better enough to play tonight. So, and again, he shows you what he brings to the table. And I think the nice thing is that he and Thomas Bryant are clearly not the same player. Davis is much more physical, low block, punishing type of guy, more of a shot blocker, probably a better defender, more comfortable playing in traffic down low. Bryant's more comfortable on the perimeter, stepping out, doing those kind of things. And briefly in the second half, we got a little glimpse at the two of them playing together, something that I don't think is going to happen real often this year.
It's great because you mentioned you kind of pinpoint Thomas's game, a guy who can kind of step out and come from up top. I mean, there was one point he's up here on the wing feeding Deron Davis down low. It's just kind of like, what is happening? These two big men are playing at the same time, and Bryant is feeding him in the post. So that happened too.
And the only thing more shocking than that was when Jawan Morgan was feeding James Blackman in the post. I'm not sure how often we're going to see that going forward.
Yeah,
but
well, we saw it tonight. And hey, they won 98-65. No real correlation there, but
both are true. In the end, they did what they should have done against a Hope College.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, this was basically your. Like most Division III teams, height is an issue. The tallest guy on their team is 6'6". You just don't see a lot of big guys floating around in D3. But they're a pretty good team for that level. I think they were pretty good. I was kind of impressed. Seemed to be well coached. That was something that Tom Crean pointed out after the game. I would agree with that. Good-looking team. Gave Indiana a good run tonight, just as far as getting up and down the floor, making them do a couple things, and taking advantage of some mistakes. I mean, I think there were 18 turnovers. Just a team that was still feeling itself out, feeling out roles, I should say. And that's going to be ongoing, I think, through the first month or so of the season. But I think as long as they can really hammer down those roles and establish those the needs and requirements of certain guys, once you establish that by the Louisville game or early in conference season, I think it's okay to have a little bit of wiggle room through these first 2 months.
So one more exhibition coming up Saturday.
Bellarmine.
Can't believe you're going to miss it.
Oh, I want to go to Rutgers.
Oh, that's right. You're excited. I forgot how excited you were for that trip.
So excited for Rutgers. It is the Honolulu of the Big Ten. Get to go to Honolulu soon, too. So.
I'll have to talk to the New Jersey State Department about that as a slogan.
They would laugh me right off the phone. That's not going to happen. All right, guys.
Well, I'll see you on Saturday
Jeremy will be
here,
here. Yeah, Jeremy will be here.
Mike will see you
I'll see
from
you too.
Piscataway.
Yeah, we'll be talking football, not basketball. Jeremy will have you with hoops. See you then.